Hi, I'm Simon Hartley.
And I'm Helen Martin.
Welcome back to Pep Talks. I am absolutely delighted to welcome Dr. Todd Dewett back with us. We had a fantastic conversation before. Really enjoyed talking with you about elevator pitches and clear, concise messaging. But I also know that you've written and spoken a lot and studied a lot about authentic leadership. And there's a question that I've picked up recently from leaders who understand the importance of authenticity and being an authentic leader and showing that you might be scared too, but balancing that with looking strong so that your people are confident, that you look confident and feel confident. And I'd be really interested to get your views on how people find that balance.
Sure. It's a great question. Pleasure to be back with both of you. So authenticity is one of my favorite topics. It's also not a panacea. It's something that we know on average we need a lot more of. On the other hand, it's not perfect, needs to be balanced and packaged correctly to be effective depending on the topic that one might be talking about. So we were talking offline a little bit about a book I'm working on, Live Hard, themes of learning from mistakes, failure, vulnerability, all these things. Living fully means taking risks, etc. How do you then, to your point in a coaching sense, if you're a leader or a coach, how do you look at someone who says, I know I'm supposed to be authentic. I know I'm supposed to speak up and admit certain truths, and I don't want it to be anything other than useful. I don't want it to be something that hurts me. And I'm speaking now as a coach. It can be problematic if you don't know what you're doing. So a couple of qualifiers that try to put that in perspective. The first is that failures, insecurities, or other perceived imperfections, which are normal for all of us, need to be explained as opposed to just stated. So you don't say the project didn't work, the client didn't like me, I didn't do this thing effectively. You have to try and explain that. Otherwise, no one, especially you, will begin learning about what it was. They'll simply be informed in a problematic sense that something didn't go well. So that's not good. The next thing, excuse me, is that frequency does matter. So when I encourage people, which I do a lot, to be honest, especially with the virus situation or any other business risk that maybe didn't work as intended or flat out failed, you don't want to be talking about it all the time, and you don't want to be admitting all of your imperfections, insecurities, and woeful thoughts every day, 24/7. This is often an absent behavior, which is why people like me preach it. On the other hand, the question is, what's the right frequency? Every person, every leader, every team is different, but the short answer is less is more. It can't be absent, which is why I do what I do. On the other hand, it can't be all the time. So I like to say for people who run teams or organizations, once a quarter minimum, there should be a moment, an honest moment, a reflective learning moment where you state something that hurt, that you didn't understand, that you didn't do right, that caused learning. So first of all, nail that frequently. Second of all, own that learning. Don't be blaming whoever it is. There's always blame to go around. In fact, blame is one of my favorite acronyms as a coach. I'll give you the rated PG version, which stands for barely legitimate, almost meaningless excuse. So no blame, so you get the frequency right, you get the no blame right, and then you proactively kick off the learning, which is to say, and here's what I think I have taken away from this situation that's going to help me and maybe you as we move forward, not to have that same type of pain point again in the near future. If you'll do all of those things, then you've made it okay for others to do the same, and learning becomes more common.
Fantastic.
I know you've said before to talk, the good leader will give people the power to do good and facilitate good to great. And I was just wondering, obviously leadership is a set of skills, but how at the moment do you reach that potential? I know you spoke about the sacred cow, and that's the way we've always done things. So how do you get people to reach their potential and come with those ideas now at the moment?
I think you start with an individual focus on yourself. I love kickstarting change conversations from the individual perspective. And the more you self-deprecate, share your learning moments, throw yourself under the bus, these related ideas, the more you make others go, okay, that's a human being just like me, not a pretentious leader just dictating to me, and thus I'm more willing to listen to them. And then you can encourage them to do the same. And the second thing to answer that question is that you remind them that the group is only where they are because we have faced these issues about our imperfections and need to improve in the past and done so successfully. Before we were a group that made this much money, these products, these services, bragged about these innovations, etc. We didn't have answers. We tried that one and it didn't work, but because of, and then tell the story, we overcame that. And we can do that again. So the context is everything. And first, it's about you as an individual being approachable because you laugh at your own humanity and learning, which we've been talking about. And second, you remind them, we're actually in this together. We've faced this wall that looks like something you can't climb together before and did it. There's no reason we can't do that again. So it's a motivational perspective building thing to try and prepare them to think through whatever the challenge might be.
Yeah.
I mean, the irony, of course, is that everybody knows failure is important. They'll stand up and say, yes, we need to make mistakes, we need to fail, etc., etc. And they feel desperately uncomfortable about doing it. And so there tends to be a kind of a lockdown on it. How do you help people get through that? You know, people that know that intrinsically this is very valuable, but they still feel reticent to do it.
No, I mean, it's a great point. I should probably start responding to that by saying, you know, hey, how did we get here? Because you are correct. You are very, sadly, strongly correct. We have this individual tendency, and it is darn near universal. Questions, how do we get there? I think that's a great place to start. In the short answer, and I'm not trying to be flippant at all, I'm being very honest with you. Parents and education. Parents, by the way, I'm a parent, and I know I'm imperfect, but I'm hopefully doing an okay job. Parents, from love, want kids to do well and keep them safe, and how that's translated to kids' ears. I'm just kind of summarizing so much science here. It's crude, but it's true. The way that translates into kids' ears is don't displease mom and dad. Don't make them feel fear. And thus I have fear about things I might do, whether it's not making a good grade or whether it's getting in trouble in the neighborhood. So that's where it comes from. Well-intentioned parents and well-intentioned education, which only creates students fearful of upsetting everyone and failing tests and not making their marks, which is odd, but those are the very profound unintended consequences of something that's otherwise extremely well-intentioned, parents and education. So what do we do with this? Man, with that preface, all you can do is model the way and share examples and make it okay to fail. Model the way, for example, I could tell you, you know, I got accolades I could brag about all day long. Or if I wanted to inspire real action instead of fearful inaction in people, I could tell you about the time I was 16 years old and got fired for the first time from a job when I was working at the local frozen yogurt shop. There's one in the States called TCBY. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it was a big chain of frozen yogurt, and I got caught giving away too much product to too many friends, and I got fired, and it was embarrassing, and it hurt, and my parents were mad. And thankfully, and I give them credit, it became a huge learning moment for me about what it means to push boundaries the right way and the wrong way. And it became instrumental for me in, frankly, taking a step forward as a professional. So modeling the way like I just did is huge. And then you got to make it okay to fail. And what I mean by that is real simple. If people do what leaders are asking them to do, and they actually speak up, they actually say, how come, what if, have we tried? Or they tweak a spreadsheet, a process of something, which is an effort to improve. And it doesn't look awesome when it comes out of their mouth or when they try something. You've got to make that okay. Now, here's a dirty, dirty secret. You ready? Most organizations and most leaders say they love creativity, they need change, innovation is everything, and they're full of it. And what happens in practice is a principled person tries something, says something for all the right reasons. And the typical busy, well-intentioned manager does not react in a positive way that encourages further behaviors like this at all. They say, no, we don't have time for that, stay on task. Or they say, that won't work because, some version of, hey, that's a dumb idea. Or maybe they go, fine, are you willing to do that work? Or some other half-honest response that isn't productive and does not make people want to deep dive on creative possibilities, let alone behaviorally engage them moving forward. So you've got to change that. You can't change an organization overnight, but as one leader, you can change your team and how they react. When someone speaks speaks up and says, no, no, no. Sometimes you'll see the team go with the grimace, the quick evaluative comment, whatever it might be. Your job as a leader is to stop that honest, quick negativity and make that not valid. It might come as we chew on an ideal, but it is not the preferred or smart initial response. So your job is to change that, number one, stop it, and then replace it with, I'm intrigued, I'm not sure I understand. Explain that some more. Or, I think I heard that worked in that division. How would we apply that? Some facilitating comment that is less evaluative and more encouraging, or you will never get the seeds of creativity to grow. So I love sharing that with you guys and whoever might be listening to our conversation today, because most people say it on the website and in the speeches and everywhere else. We need it. We love it. It's everything. And then they do not behaviorally act that way when someone tries to act on it. That's your first target for making real change.
Yeah, I was reflecting on this one with some sports coaches, how in education failure and mistakes have been designed out of the system, and that actually what we need to do is design them back in again. And part of that, actually, we were talking about the importance of creating margin for error. Because if there is no margin for error, you can't go anywhere, you can't try anything, you can't move beyond this very, very tight boundary that you've set yourself. And that within business, if everybody's locked onto a target, and we've, I like the whole concept of lean, but it tends to take out the margin for error. Yep. And it tries to keep things very, very neat and tidy. Well, actually, experimentation's messy, isn't it? And it usually takes longer, and we have failures along the way, and it might even cost more. And so actually you kind of got to design it back in again.
You used a great word, actually. I got to give props to this word, and then Helen, we keep stepping on you. My apologies. I can't wait to hear your comment. The word mess. I love it because learning is messy by design, and there's just no getting around it, period. A lot of eggs to make an omelet, pick your metaphor. But if we don't get people to think about that and learn to get comfortable, one of my favorite words, comfortable with that reality, you'll never see the innovation you claim that you want to see.
Yeah, I read recently that if you are going to peddle a new idea, don't do it at a board meeting, or don't do it when you have a lot of people around the table. Send it to a couple of people first, get a few people who are going to be there to feed into it, because once you present it collectively, it becomes one person says something and everybody jumps to that way of thinking. Would you agree with that? Is that something that...
It's a great comment. And in fact, one of the topics I've talked about a lot. So before I became a leadership person or known for that, I was a little more niched out, which is where scholars start. And I was into creativity and innovation, especially employees trying to produce creative ideas. It's kind of where my little tiny place I started. There's a lot of research about brainstorming and related ideas, and how we sit around a table or electronically connect and try to make ideas happen. Few punchlines that really speak to what you just said. First of all, going into a meeting and having all of us face to face and having someone in charge kickstart that conversation. Okay, we know why we're here. Guys, I need some ideas. Here's what I think, blah, blah, blah. What about you? That's a prescription, by the way. It comes from a great place. Someone who cares about managing time effectively and being frank with their team and being open to their team. But they have just done a lot of work without even knowing it at shutting down their team, because their authority, their status is something others can feel in a visceral sense, because they've led with their own idea, which precludes everyone else wanting to share their unique, possibly very different ideas. So we have lots of good intentions in doing that, but there's some smart ways to start. You mentioned electronically with a smaller number. I would love to reiterate that and say, don't start with a big face-to-face group. Always start with homework electronically, so that people can at least think and maybe produce a thought or two before we do the traditional meeting. That means we have no excuse or less likelihood of moments of silence where someone says, I need ideas, and everyone kind of goes like this and doesn't know what to say, because the question was just asked to them on the fly. So electronically, with subgroups especially, first, you can then get things done in far more safe context. And then we bring things into a bigger conversation. Last idea about that same idea. If you're the chief, male, female, I don't care. If you have a role that says I'm the leader, just choose to happily not lead sometimes. Sometimes you got to tell others to step in and do it for you, because if you'll do that, and I like to think every 10th meeting, something of that nature, you're wise to do that, because then others will step up and they will say things and act in ways they normally wouldn't have, and conversations that often don't happen just because of your strong presence start to happen. And that's priceless if you'll just choose to give them permission to lead a little more often.
The other thing I heard a really great leader talking to his team about was we need the space to break things. We have to be able to break things. And it was actually a principle that I picked up from studying world-class performers. I asked them, how do you know if you've pushed right to the limit? And the answer was always, you have to push it far enough to break it, and then you bring it back a little bit. And I was talking to one guy who was a world barista champion about some of those occasions where they've done things that just didn't work. And he talked about spending some time in an experimental kitchen with a guy called Heston Blumenthal, who's a 3 Michelin star chef. And he said, we just tried loads of stuff. He said, never, ever, ever eat coffee mayonnaise. It's disgusting. But you have to try it to know. You have to push it that far until it breaks, and then you can bring it back a little bit. But that's the way that they operate. That's how they create really revolutionary, kind of paradigm shifting, in some cases, food.
I got to jump on that and say, probably the most or one of the most famous design innovation related firms we've seen so far is called IDEO, IDEO. And something they popularized many years ago, I assume they're still doing it, and I know many others have been influenced to do it, to your point, is to not only push things to the point of breaking, but this is huge, ready? You've got to remember how you created those breaks and the pain that it created and the embarrassing products that didn't pan out that it created. And so they had a library of go-to embarrassing, didn't work, worth a damn products that they could go and look at, talk about, remember, and reference. And it got bigger over time because innovation means you got more mistakes than wins. And so they had a literal library of screw-ups / learning that they could go reference so they wouldn't forget the things they learned as they tried to push for innovation. Pretty cool, huh?
Very
like
cool.
Ben and Jerry's graveyard for those flavors that didn't work out. And who knew people would go and see that graveyard and have a look at them? But it is sort of the story. So good.
Correct.
So another thing, Todd, I watched your video on real people, and you're talking about leadership in quite a way for me that was interesting, because everybody wants to be the best leader they can be. But you talk about not leading from the top down. I think that's, being real with this. So just touch on that a little bit, because at the moment, I think that's kind of hugely important. You don't want to spread the fear. You want to be a good leader, but with empathy. What are your suggestions?
Yeah, there's several good questions in there. So how do you lead with empathy and not be too dictatorial, leading from the top down? I think that I've often said, share the credit, share the pain. I could go for an hour on each one of those as classic rules for effective leaders. Now, maybe more than ever, is an amazingly obvious time to learn how to share the pain. And what I mean by that is when others have to take on certain challenges or hardships, leaders always should attempt to do the same or more on their own to show solidarity. This is such a basic, powerful idea, but I think we can all admit we don't see it as often as we should. Hey, there's layoffs while a CEO has got unbelievable compensation. I'm not saying that's a simplistically wrong scenario. I'm saying that there is unbelievable room for us to do better in terms of showing solidarity when our employee base is in pain. Right now might be the best ever. We're seeing so many furloughs and layoffs. It's really quite sad to read the news and to talk to your networks and to hear about it. At a minimum, people can stop CEOs and other visible leaders can stop conspicuous consumption, can defer or stop excessive, I'll let you struggle with how to define that, compensation type perks, and frankly, to increase visibility, rolling up the sleeves, if you will, in a literal sense, to go help people do jobs because people are in need. So I'm thinking in response to your comment about a gentleman retired now for several years, maybe 5 or 10, from Southwest Airlines. He got famous, Herb Kelleher. He was quite famous for being a man of the people as a leader, and he would do certain things that symbolized that beautifully because he wanted to go be one of the people and do work with them and not be always removed from them. And so he would go and check in luggage for the airline and grab the bags and throw them back, just like anyone else who was a frontline hourly worker. I think that's always a good idea. I think now, or under any really adverse condition, challenging situation, it is more important than ever. Question one, if I get up every day and I'm a CEO of a large firm, is how can I do something visible today to show everyone who I can't talk to but has some visibility of who I am, understand that I get it and I want to help? What is that above and beyond even physical task I can do to show that I care, not just say that I care?
Fantastic. And, you know, those acts often take people into their discomfort zone. You know, that's not the comfort zone of the boardroom. That's out into their discomfort zone. But it's the hugely valuable stuff that people will remember.
Absolutely true. It's personal. And when people see personal and they believe it's sincere and genuine, that creates bonds like few things possibly can.
Fantastic. I know earlier you said your book, Live Hard, is in the process of being written at the moment. When can people expect it? When should we keep a lookout for it?
Well, thanks for asking very much. I'm terribly excited. This is my second book of stories. Writing for me in terms of books kind of started when I realized that people enjoy reading them almost as much as storytellers telling them. So I wrote something called Show Your Ink. This is the second group. I've got maybe a draft done of 13 of 20 intended new stories around the themes we've been discussing. I think late this year is likely when it's going to be out, worst case, probably first quarter.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you again for joining us. It's been absolutely brilliant. Time has flown as always. Helen, thank you for joining us. Todd, thank you again. Thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you on another episode of Pep Talks. Take care.